Owen's voice echoed through the hallway like thunder crashing against thin walls. Jacqueline stood still at the end of it, her back to him, hands clenched tightly at her sides, nails digging into her own skin, just to feel something real. Something that didn't burn like his words. You think walking away makes you strong. Owen spat, his tone half rage, half disgust. You think that's peace? It's cowardice. Jacqueline didn't turn around. She'd learned that silence carried more power than screaming. She had screamed before, cried, begged, reasoned, tried to love him back into being someone she could stay with. But that version of Owen had stopped existing a long time ago. He used to be kind, gentle even. There were days when he'd touch her like she was something precious, laugh with her like they were the only people left in the world. But somewhere between success, ego, and late-night absences, that version of him had withered. What was left was cold, sharp, always looking to win. Owen stepped closer, his footsteps slow and deliberate. Say something, Jack. Don't play the quiet card again. You always act like you're above this, like you're so enlightened. Guess what? That don't work on real people. She exhaled through her nose, calm on the surface. Inside, a storm was raging, but it was one she'd already made peace with. You want real, she said finally, turning to meet his stare. Real is that I don't recognize you anymore. Real is waking up every day wondering how I let myself shrink into the shadow of a man who talks to me like I'm garbage. Real is sitting at dinner with you and wishing I was anywhere else. Owen's jaw locked. He didn't like being the villain, not when he could twist it into her being the problem. He took a step back, pacing now, like a lion inside a too small cage. You're acting like I'm the only one who's made mistakes, he snapped. You think you've been perfect? You've been distant, cold. You stopped touching me, stopped looking at me like I mattered. What am I supposed to do with that? You want honesty, Jacqueline said, voice still calm, but eyes shining now with the kind of fire that wasn't anger. It was freedom. You didn't stop mattering. You just started mattering in a different way, like a lesson, like a warning sign, and I listened too late. The silence stretched. He didn't expect her to talk like that, to sound so final. She had always cried and stayed, fought and stayed. But this wasn't a fight. This wasn't her trying to win. It was her choosing to walk away from the battlefield. You'll regret this, he said, quieter this time. No, she answered. I regret staying this long. He opened his mouth to respond, but she was already gone, walking down the hallway without a bag, without a suitcase. Just keys in one hand and her shoes in the other. She didn't need much. She didn't want anything from him. Outside it was cold. The kind of cold that bit through the coat she'd grabbed in a hurry. But it was nothing compared to how she'd felt in that house. She walked without a plan, just the sound of her footsteps on the pavement and her mind finally breathing. Later that night, she found herself knocking on a door she hadn't visited in months. Margie opened it with a shocked expression that quickly melted into warmth. Oh my God, Margie whispered, pulling her in without another word. You did it, didn't you? Jacqueline nodded against her shoulder, letting herself be held for the first time in a long while. I'm not broken, she murmured. I'm just starting over. Margie smiled through tears. And I'm right here with you. In another part of the city, Owen stood in the kitchen, pouring whiskey into a glass with hands that trembled more than he wanted to admit. He stared at the empty hallway, her silence still echoing louder than all the arguments they'd ever had. She wasn't coming back, and for the first time in years, he was truly alone. The first morning without her felt like a bad dream, Owen couldn't shake off. The house was too still. The usual sound of her coffee mug clinking against the kitchen counter. Gone. No soft hum of her music playing from the bathroom. No scent of her perfume lingering in the hallway. Just cold air and a silence that pressed against his ears like static. He didn't want to admit it, but something about waking up alone made his chest feel tight. Not heartbreak. He didn't want to call it that. Owen had always thought he was the one with control, the one who could live without anyone. He'd even told her once, "I don't need you. I choose to be with you." But now he was realizing maybe she had been the one choosing him all along, and she had finally stopped. He texted her twice. Nothing dramatic, just, "I know I messed up. We should talk." No reply. He scrolled back through their messages, reading old conversations, where she used to send him pictures of her lunch. Little jokes. Late night come home safe texts. The contrast between then and now was nauseating. He stared at the screen for a while longer, before tossing the phone onto the couch. Jacqueline woke up to the sound of Margie frying something in the kitchen. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she felt the softness of the couch cushions beneath her, saw the unfamiliar ceiling, and it all came back. Last night, the fight, the walk, the freedom. It still felt unfamiliar, like new skin. She wasn't sure how to move in yet. Margie peeked around the corner with a wooden spoon in one hand, and her messy bun sliding halfway off her head. "You want eggs or just toast? Or I can pour you wine and call it breakfast." Jacqueline let out a laugh, the first real one in what felt like weeks. "Just toast. I can't stomach anything heavy right now." "You slept like a rock," Margie said, disappearing back into the kitchen. "Did you check your phone yet?" Jacqueline grimaced. "No. I already know he probably texted." "He did," Margie said casually. "I saw your screen light up around midnight. Twice. You want to read them?" "No." She didn't even have to think about it. "I already know what they'll say. He's not sorry. He just doesn't like losing." Margie brought over a plate and slid it in front of her, then sat down with her own. "You think he'll really leave you alone?" Jacqueline chewed slowly. "Owen doesn't take no well. He's used to bending things his way. But I'm not bendable anymore." Margie watched her for a long moment. "I'm proud of you, you know." Jacqueline didn't answer right away. She stared down at her toast, then out the window. "I just want to remember who I was before him. It's like I forgot. I became this version of me that existed around his moods, his schedule, his cold shoulders. I want my life back. My real life." Margie reached over, squeezed her hand. "You will, one step at a time." Later that day, Owen showed up at David's place. Not because they were especially close anymore. They hadn't been since college. But because David was one of the few people who knew both him and Jacqueline. David opened the door in sweats, holding a half-eaten granola bar. "Well, look who decided to drop in. Can we talk?" David stepped aside. "Let me guess, Jack's gone, and now you want someone to tell you she'll come back." Owen shot him a glare, but walked in. "She left without saying goodbye." You don't really get to expect goodbyes when you've been treating someone like trash for a year straight," David said, closing the door. "You think I haven't seen it?" Owen dropped onto the couch. "I didn't think it was that bad. That's the problem." David crossed his arms. "You never think it's that bad until someone actually leaves you. Then suddenly you want to talk about feelings." There was a pause. "I miss her," Owen said, finally sounding like a human being instead of a storm. "I didn't think she'd actually go." "Well," David said, his tone cold, "you thought wrong." Later that evening, Jacqueline sat by Margie's balcony, watching the sun sink behind the city skyline, its last light stretching across rooftops like soft golden threads. Her fingers cradled a warm cup of tea, but her thoughts were miles away, back, in the house she had fled, back in the hollow echo of Owen's voice, the way his words used to crawl beneath her skin and stay there for days. She wasn't crying, not anymore. That part of her had gone quiet. There was no mourning left in her, just reflection, the kind that stung but didn't bleed. Margie slid the balcony door open and stepped out with a blanket, tossing it gently over Jacqueline's shoulders before sitting beside her. "You don't look sad," Margie said softly. "I'm not," Jacqueline replied, "but I'm adjusting. It's like trying to remember how to breathe without a weight on your chest." Margie nodded. "You want distraction? We could go out. I know a rooftop place with overpriced drinks and mediocre jazz." Jacqueline smiled faintly. "I think I just want to sit still for a while. I've been running inside my own head for too long." They sat in comfortable silence until Margie spoke again. "You know he's going to try harder, right? Owen's the type who doesn't understand quiet decisions. He thinks every ending is a negotiation." Jacqueline's face tightened, but she nodded. "Yeah, that's what scares me." She didn't have to wait long. The next day, a flower delivery arrived at Margie's apartment. Big, dramatic, loud. The kind Owen used to send after fights, when words failed him. But ego made him perform the gesture anyway. There was a card. Just 5 words. "Let's talk. Please." Owen. Jacqueline didn't even touch the card. Margie read it aloud, then tossed it in the trash without asking. "He's not changing. He's just chasing." Jacqueline exhaled. "He doesn't miss me. He misses control." She didn't reply to the flowers. And the next day, another delivery came, this time her favorite pastries, from the bakery near their old apartment. Then a text. "I know I was harsh. I want to explain. Let me fix this." She stared at it for minutes before locking her phone and placing it face down. Across the city, Owen was pacing in his office, frustration crawling through him like fire. David had barely returned his messages after their last talk. Margie had blocked him, and Jacqueline ghosted. The more she ignored him, the more unbalanced he felt. He didn't like being on this side of the story. He was the one who called the shots. People didn't leave him. They cried, begged, threatened, maybe slammed doors. But they always came back. He hadn't considered that Jacqueline wouldn't. He started going through photos on his phone. Ones from better times, vacations, birthdays, lazy Sundays in bed. She looked so happy in some of them. And that part drove him crazy. If she could smile like that once, then what had changed? The truth slipped past his ego in a brief, bitter second. He had. She had been patient, loving, too loving probably, and he had taken that softness and used it like a pillow, comfortable, convenient, and easy to punch when he didn't know how to manage his emotions. She had made excuses for him, smoothed over his outbursts, absorbed the sharpness of his moods, until she had nothing left to shield herself with, and now she was gone. He called her, straight to voicemail. "Jacqueline, listen. I know you don't want to talk. I know I messed up. I was cruel, and I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. But please, at least let me see you, just once. We don't even have to talk about us. Just let me say what I should have said a long time ago. I don't want to lose you like this. I can be better. I want to be." He ended the call, then leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. There was no music, no voice, no reply. That night, Jacqueline went for a walk alone. She needed air, time, and space to feel everything she had pushed down over the years. She found herself near their old street and paused across from the building, where they used to live. The windows were dark, curtains drawn. Funny how a place that used to feel like home now just looked like another square box of memories she didn't want to open. She turned away before she could second-guess anything. She wasn't walking back into pain, not for flowers, not for pastries, not for promises whispered too late. Jacqueline's footsteps carried her to a quiet bookstore, tucked between a laundromat and a faded bakery, the kind of place most people walked past without noticing. But something about the soft glow of the window and the worn-out sign made her pause. She didn't come here to shop. She came to breathe, to escape the digital world, the ringing phone, and the aching echo of Owen's voice, asking for just one more chance. Inside, the air smelled like old pages and cinnamon tea. An elderly man at the counter nodded at her, then returned to the crossword, puzzle in front of him. No questions, no sales pitch, just peace. She wandered through the aisles slowly, letting her fingers trail along cracked spines and faded covers. Stories whispered around her, stories of people who had lost things and found new parts of themselves in the ruins. That's what she needed now, something to remind her that endings weren't always disasters. Sometimes they were invitations. Her phone buzzed again. Owen, I know you think I'm just trying to pull you back in. I'm not. I've been talking to someone. A therapist. I'm trying, Jack. Please believe that. Just give me 10 minutes. That's all I'm asking. She stared at the message without opening it. A week ago, that might have meant something. Now it just felt like another performance. Another set of carefully chosen words to poke at her guilt. Jacqueline closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, then turned off her phone and slid it into her bag. She picked up a book at random, paid for it in silence, and left without saying a word. That, in itself, felt like power. Meanwhile, Owen sat across from a woman named Linda in a tiny office with beige walls and too many fake plants. She wore thick glasses and a tight bun and looked at him like she had already seen 100 men like him today. I didn't think therapy was going to be like this, Owen muttered, after 15 minutes of stammering through excuses. What did you expect it to be? Linda asked, without looking up from her notebook. I don't know. Less aggressive. You're not exactly comforting. Linda looked up then. I'm not here to comfort you, Owen. I'm here to make you look at the version of yourself your partner couldn't survive being around. He shifted in the chair, uncomfortable. She says I was cruel, but I never hit her. I didn't cheat. I paid the bills. I didn't scream at her every day. I don't know, I got distant. I got tired. She stopped appreciating things. She changed. Let's talk about what you did, not what she didn't do, Linda said, her voice flat. What made you angry? What made you treat her like she owed you her silence? Owen rubbed his face. I didn't mean to. I had a lot of pressure at work. I felt like I was drowning sometimes. And when I came home, she always wanted to talk. About feelings. About us. I just needed space. And when she gave you space, you called it coldness. He looked up, caught off guard. Linda leaned forward. You punished her for needing you. You froze her out every time she stood her ground. You used silence like a weapon, Owen. No, you didn't hit her. But don't flatter yourself into thinking that means you weren't hurting her. He didn't answer. He couldn't, because part of him knew it was true. That night, Jacqueline curled up on Margie's couch with the book she'd bought. A story about a woman who left a controlling marriage and rebuilt her life in a quiet coastal town. The plot was simple. The writing wasn't extraordinary, but it made her chest ache in all the right ways. Margie walked in with 2 mugs of cocoa and dropped onto the other end of the couch. Still ignoring him. Yeah, Jacqueline said quietly. You good? She nodded, then shook her head. It's weird. He says he's in therapy now. Margie raised an eyebrow. You believe it? I believe he thinks it'll fix everything. That if he checks the right boxes, I'll come back. Margie handed her the mug. You're not going back, are you? Jacqueline stared at the steam rising from her drink. I don't think there's a back to go to. I don't miss who I was with him. That version of me was always apologizing for things I didn't even do. That girl cried in the bathroom, more than she laughed in the living room. Margie didn't say anything. She just reached over and rested her hand on Jacqueline's knee. I'm not her anymore, Jacqueline whispered. And for once she believed it. Owen didn't sleep that night. He stared at the ceiling for hours, his thoughts folding in on themselves, like knives turning inward. Jacqueline hadn't blocked his number. That was the part that twisted him the most. She could have, but she didn't. She wanted him to see her silence. That silence was louder than any screaming match they ever had. He replayed their final days on loop, looking for the moment it all started unraveling. Maybe it was the time she asked him to come home early for dinner, and he brushed her off without even looking up from his laptop. Or the night she sat across from him, eyes rimmed red, asking if he even saw her anymore, and he told her she was. Being dramatic, he hadn't said it then. But the truth was, he did see her. He just didn't want to deal with what she was becoming. Stronger, quieter, less forgiving. And now she was gone, and he had no control left. By morning, he was pacing again. It wasn't just guilt, it was fear. Not of being alone, but of being forgotten by the one person who had known him beneath all the pride and sharp edges. He picked up his phone and recorded a voice message, something raw and unfiltered. Jack, I know I don't deserve your time. I know saying sorry won't unhurt you, but I want to say it anyway. I was cruel, you were kind, and I broke that. I don't even recognize myself when I think about how I treated you, but I'm trying now, not to win you back, just to make peace with the version of me that lost you. He didn't send it. He saved it in drafts, stared at it for a long moment, then closed his phone. Jacqueline woke up to sunlight spilling across the guest room. She stretched, and for the first time in weeks, her muscles didn't feel like they were bracing for something. The weight had started to lift. Not gone completely, but not crushing either. She made her way to the kitchen where Margie was already sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone. Morning, Jacqueline said, voice still gravelly with sleep. Margie looked up. You seem lighter. I am, Jacqueline said. I didn't dream of him last night. That stopped Margie mid-sip. Damn. Progress. Jacqueline grinned, then grabbed a glass of water and leaned against the counter. I'm thinking about looking for my own place. Margie's face lit up. You serious? Yeah. I need space. Somewhere that doesn't hold memories of him. Margie nodded. We'll find you a cozy little apartment where no one ever raises their voice, and you can buy throw pillows that make you happy. Jacqueline laughed. And maybe plants. Real ones this time. Not just the fake ones Owen said were pointless. Margie rolled her eyes. Oh my God, he really said that? Yeah, he said. Why nurture something that doesn't give anything back? Margie snorted. Like the irony didn't just slap him in the face. Jacqueline smiled, but inside, something twisted. Not because she missed him, but because for so long, she believed him. Believed that her softness was weakness. That loving gently made her disposable. She knew better. Now, her phone buzzed. No message this time. Just a notification. Voice memo saved. Jack apology. She didn't open it. She didn't have to. Letting go didn't mean she didn't care. It meant she finally loved herself more than she feared being alone. That afternoon, Jacqueline visited an apartment down the street, from a park she used to walk through before. She met Owen. The place was small, studio-sized, with creaky floors and paint peeling slightly at the corners. But it had wide windows and sunlight that touched every inch of the room. The landlord, a kind older woman named Lucille, handed her the keys with a smile. "You can think about it, dear. No rush." Jacqueline looked around once more, then said, "I don't need to think. I'll take it." As she stepped outside, she noticed a familiar figure standing across the street. Win. He looked like he hadn't slept. Dark circles, wrinkled shirt, no practiced smile. He didn't speak, just looked at her. Really looked at her. Jacqueline stood still, calm, rooted. He started walking toward her, but she raised her hand, stopping him with just a glance. "No," she said softly but firmly. His lips parted. No," she repeated. "You don't need to say it. I already know. And I hope one day you'll mean it for someone else, but not me. Not anymore." He swallowed hard and nodded, eyes stinging, and then he watched her walk away, not out of anger, not in fear, but in peace. She never looked back. Jacqueline spent her first night in the new apartment with nothing but a mattress on the floor, a pillow she'd borrowed from Margie, and a half-empty bottle of wine she picked up on the way home. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't curated for Instagram, but it was hers. No footsteps storming down the hall. No slammed doors. No silence weaponized like a knife. Just the hum of the city outside her window and the creak of her own breathing slowing. Down. She lay there, staring at the ceiling, unfamiliar shadows dancing across it. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to brace herself for something to go wrong. She let the quiet fill the room, and this time, it didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like space. The next morning, she made coffee on the borrowed hot plate Lucille had lent her and sat cross-legged on the bare floor with a notebook she hadn't touched in years. Writing used to be her escape, long before Owen, back when her thoughts were hers and no one else's to critique or correct. She opened the cover, wrote a single sentence. "I didn't survive him to become bitter. I survived him to become free." She stared at it for a while, then kept writing. Across the city, Owen sat in Linda's office again. The sessions weren't getting easier. They were just getting clearer. And that clarity was a new kind of pain. "She saw me," he said, staring at the floor. "Really saw me, and I made her feel invisible." Linda nodded, but didn't comfort him. That wasn't her job. "And now?" she asked. "I see her everywhere," Owen admitted. "In my kitchen, in the empty space next to my bed." She left, but she's still here somehow. "She's not," Linda said gently. "You're just haunted by the way you failed to love her right." Owen flinched at the bluntness. He deserved it. "I thought I was the strong one," he whispered. "That I held it all together, but she was the glue. I was just the weight." Linda leaned back, scribbled something in her notebook. "Strength doesn't come from holding on. Sometimes it comes from letting someone go and choosing to change anyway." He nodded slowly. "I'm not changing to get her back. I know that door's closed. I'm changing because, for once, I want to be someone I don't want to run from." That was the first honest thing he'd said in weeks. Jacqueline was on, the floor painting her walls 3 days later, brush streaks uneven, her hands smudged with off-white color that definitely didn't match the sample card. But she didn't care. Margie arrived with sandwiches and a Bluetooth speaker, plopping down beside her. "So, therapy boy's still trying." Jacqueline wiped her forehead. "Not really. He hasn't texted in a few days." "You think he's done?" "I think," she said thoughtfully, "he's learning that apologies don't always earn rewards. Sometimes they just need to exist quietly. Margie raised a toast with her soda. To unlearning toxic love, Jacqueline clinked her cup against Margie's. And to not waiting for someone to rescue you when you're perfectly capable of building your own damn ladder. On Saturday, Jacqueline wandered into a community art space around the corner from her new place. There were flyers on the wall for writing groups, open mic nights, and one workshop titled Rewriting Your Story. Something about that pulled at her. She signed up on the spot. The first session was small. Just 5 women and 1 man, sitting in a circle on worn cushions. When it was Jacqueline's turn to introduce herself, her voice trembled for a moment, but she didn't lie. I left someone who didn't know how to love me without breaking me first, she said, voice quiet but steady. I used to think surviving him was enough, but now I want to live. They didn't clap. They didn't cry. They just nodded. And that was enough. That night, Owen stood at his window, looking down at the empty street. His apartment felt colder, lately, bigger. Like the walls stretched wider just to echo more. He hadn't texted her in days. Not because he didn't want to, but because, for the first time, he understood she wasn't an unfinished sentence. She was a closed chapter, and maybe, if he ever did get the chance to speak to her again, it wouldn't be to win her back. It would be to thank her for leaving, because, sometimes, the most loving thing a person can do is walk away and mean it. 2 months passed. The weather turned, leaves crisped, and fell like memories from the trees. And Jacqueline had stopped counting the days since she'd left. Not because she didn't remember, but because she no longer needed to. Her new apartment had come to life in pieces. A second-hand bookshelf here. A rug she found on clearance that looked nothing like anything Owen would have approved of. A cracked mug from the flea market that made her smile every morning. Everything in the space was hers by choice, not by compromise. She was no longer surviving. She was living, slowly, steadily, softly. The writing workshop became her anchor. Every week, she showed up and peeled back another layer of herself. Some stories were heavy, others silly, some too real to say out loud. So she wrote them in her notebook and let them sit there, healing on the page. One night after the workshop, as she packed her things, the facilitator approached her. "You've got a voice that people want to listen to," the woman said gently. "You ever thought about sharing your story somewhere bigger? A blog maybe? Readings?" Jacqueline flushed. "I don't know. I'm still figuring out what the story is." The woman smiled. "Sometimes figuring it out is the story." Jacqueline carried that thought home with her. It stayed with her as she lit candles in the evening, cooked quiet dinners, and danced barefoot to old soul records when no one was watching. She didn't miss him, not in the way people expected. There were no late-night tears, no wine-fueled breakdowns. What she missed sometimes was the hope she used to feel when she thought he might change. That ache, that innocent, naive wish. But even that had started to fade. Owen hadn't reached out again. He'd stayed in therapy. 3 times a week now. He journaled, read books that challenged him, talked less, listened more. And it wasn't glamorous. It was brutal, actually, peeling back the layers of himself and realizing how hollow some of them had been. He missed her, yes. But more than that, he respected her now in a way he hadn't when she was still reachable. Back then, her love had felt like an obligation. Now he understood it had been a gift. David noticed the change in him too, when Owen invited him over one night and didn't spend the whole evening trying to justify the past. David finally said it out loud. "You're different." Owen shrugged. "Too late kind of different." David nodded. "But still different. That counts." Owen looked down at his drink. swirling it. She saved herself. And I think that's what broke me the most. Realizing she didn't need me. Not even a little. David leaned back in his chair. You know what's wild? I think, if you really loved her, watching her heal without you should hurt and also make you proud. Owen didn't answer right away, but deep down, it did. One Sunday morning, Jacqueline was at the park near her apartment, sitting on a bench with her journal open and a pen between her fingers. A little girl on a scooter passed by and waved at her. She waved back, smiling, hot light. Margie had been trying to convince her to go on a date for weeks now. Not a husband, not a relationship, Margie would say. Just someone to laugh with. Someone who reminds you that love doesn't have to feel like walking on glass. Jacqueline hadn't said no, but she hadn't said yes either. She wasn't afraid of love. She just wasn't starving for it anymore. She was whole, and she wanted to meet someone from wholeness, not from need. As she sat there scribbling ideas for a short story, a voice interrupted her thoughts. Sorry, is this seat taken? She looked up. A man, around her age, maybe a bit older, stood beside the bench, coffee in one hand and a book in the other. Not dressed to impress. Not smiling too much. Just real. No, go ahead, she said, sliding. Her things over. He sat, opened his book, and for a few minutes, they just existed in the same quiet. Then he said, You right. Jacqueline blinked, surprised. Yeah, just thoughts mostly. Same. Sometimes I think my notebook knows me better than most people. She smiled. I know the feeling. They didn't exchange names that day. Just words. Just space. And as the sun crept higher and the world moved gently around them, Jacqueline realized something beautiful. Peace didn't mean you shut the world out. Sometimes, peace meant letting the world in again, slowly, deliberately, and on your own terms. Weeks passed, and spring began to press gently into the edges of the city, warming windowsills and softening the wind. Jacqueline had settled into a rhythm, mornings with tea and writing, afternoons spent walking or reading, and evenings filled with her workshop, laughter with Margie, or peaceful silence. She hadn't seen the man from the park again, but she found herself thinking about him more than she expected, not in a desperate, butterflies in the stomach kind of way, but in a curious one. There was something about how easy it had been, sitting beside someone without pressure or performance, just two strangers in their own bubbles, overlapping gently. One Saturday afternoon, Jacqueline was walking back from the corner grocery store with a bag of oranges and some tulips when she spotted him again. He was leaning against the same bench, flipping through a notebook. His brow furrowed in thought. She paused a few feet away, unsure if she should interrupt. But before she could decide, he looked up and smiled. Genuine, surprised, warm. I was hoping you'd come back. Jacqueline blinked. You were. He nodded. Been showing up here every Saturday since. Thought maybe the universe would be kind twice. She laughed softly. Looks like it was. He stood, slipping his notebook into his bag. I'm James, by the way. Jacqueline. Jacqueline? He repeated. Strong name. Feels like it belongs to someone who's seen things and kept. Walking anyway. She smiled. Something like that. They walked together that afternoon. Nothing planned, no destination, just slow conversation. James was thoughtful, not in the polished way Owen had been early on, but in the raw, self-aware kind of way that didn't need to dominate a room to feel present. He listened like he wanted to hear, not just respond. And Jacqueline didn't tell him her whole story. Not yet. But she did tell him she liked being alone, that she was building her life from scratch, and that she wasn't in a rush for anything. He didn't flinch. I get that, he said. Took me a long time to realize healing's not about erasing the past. It's about learning to carry it differently. They didn't kiss. They didn't make promises. But when they parted ways, she felt a flutter, not of dependence, but of hope. The soft kind. Back in her apartment, Jacqueline placed the tulips in a jar near the window and looked around at the space she'd built. It wasn't perfect. Some of the furniture still didn't match. The paint in the bathroom was chipping, and the floor creaked worse than ever. But it was hers. Every part of it was chosen. She opened her notebook and wrote, "Healing doesn't always look like sunlight and laughter. Sometimes it looks like finally answering a question without shrinking, like setting the table for one and not feeling lonely, like saying no without guilt, like smiling at a stranger without fear, like choosing peace again and again, even when your past whispers for chaos." She set the pen down and read the words back to herself, not to edit them, not to perfect them, just to honor them. As for Owen, he had learned to live in silence, the kind that didn't demand someone else carry the weight of his moods. He still showed up to therapy, still worked on himself, but he had stopped imagining reconciliation. That was no longer the goal. He understood now that not every story ends with winning someone back. Some stories end with learning why you lost them in the first place. One evening, he listened to the old voice message he never sent. Just once. Then he deleted it, not out of anger, not out of shame, but because he finally accepted she wasn't coming back, and she didn't need to. Months later, Jacqueline stood at a small open mic night, hosted by her writing group. She wore a soft blue sweater and jeans, and held a folded sheet of paper in her hand. Her name was called. She stepped up to the microphone. She cleared her throat, voice steady. "This piece is called The Goodbye That Saved Me," and she began to read. Her voice didn't shake. Her hands didn't tremble. And in the crowd, Margie watched with quiet pride. And beside her, James, no longer just the man from the park, smiled in that soft, encouraging way he always did. Jacqueline finished the last line, and the room stayed, silent for a second longer than usual, not because they didn't know what to say, but because every word had landed. She stepped down from the mic, heart calm. She didn't need applause. She had already won. The end, want another story,